Welcome back to Fill in the Blanks, everybody. I have a very, very interesting episode today with a very interesting guest that I've been anxious to get on, and I'm going to tell you why. First, the guest is Dr. Suzy D'Enbeau, and she was on an episode recently that I did about pronouns. And this was a very talked about episode on Dr. Phil. There was a lot of engagement about this, a lot of people talking about it, a lot of activity after the show. It hasn't been very long since it was on, and I wanted to talk to the good doctor about all of that because I felt like she had so much more to say. We were so crowded in the show, and I just had to give her an opportunity to say a lot of things that she didn't get to say, not because of her. She is a communications expert, but because of me and my timing and all the things that were jammed into the show. So I wanted to give her an opportunity, and she was kind enough to be generous with her time and come on here again. And you're going to see her on Dr. Phil again, I hope, if she is generous with her time some more. But she is an associate professor in the School of Communication Studies at Kent State University. She's a graduate of Purdue, and let's just say this is one smart cookie and has a lot to say about a lot of different things. She specializes, as I say, in communications, feminism, and gender as well. There's just a lot going on. She's got over 20 publications, and we can talk about those later as well. But welcome to Dr. Suzy D'Enbeau. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm glad. And you're snowed in up there, so we've kind of shuffled our schedules around, and I appreciate you being flexible to do that. We're doing this on a Saturday, but as I said, I wanted to get this on as close to the episode as possible because people are really buzzing about everything that we talked about. You know, pronouns, let's talk about this a little bit. When we're talking about pronouns, in case somebody has been off the planet for the last couple of years and doesn't know what we're talking about, we're talking about how people are referred to. And this isn't something that was talked about in the 50s or 60s, right? 70s, right. 80s. This is something that's fairly contemporary, true?
It's contemporary to some. Yes, it is. It's a cultural shift that we're experiencing.
Why is this coming up now instead of 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 10 years ago?
It's just because that's how cultures change, and that and they just evolve, and it happens over time. And when people get real upset about this one, this particular iteration of a change, sometimes they don't understand how culture change works. So you can say, think about the clothes people wore in the 50s. And then in the 60s and in the 70s. And those changes just happen gradually. And this one is just another part of those changes. I think that people would think the implications are more so than just changes in clothing, but they happen gradually to all of a sudden it is really prominent to a lot of people.
One of the things that I wanted to explore with you is why you think this has become such a hot topic. And frankly, I don't want to spend our entire time talking about this because I think you have an awful lot to offer to a divided nation beyond pronouns with regard to communication and all. But I wanted to start on this because it was the last thing that you and I talked about. So I wanted to start on this, but then I want to talk about some other things too. Why is this such a divisive issue? Because I think it is a divisive issue.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. And it's good to talk about this example in addition to what you said, because it's an example of how I approach communication and conflict in general. There's at least two reasons it's divisive. First, you have people like Matt Walsh and his team capitalizing and exploiting the very real uncertainty that people can feel and face when there is a culture change like this. For me, I think it makes total sense to have people be fearful around something like gender pronouns or personal pronouns, and to feel anxiety when they learn about that. because it can question their fundamental core beliefs that they've grown up with, that might be a part of their community, their religious faith. That's what they've learned from their parents. And it's not, in some ways, it can be a luxury to have the time to explore all these differences and really to do that kind of educating. And if it doesn't happen in your community, then you're just not exposed to it. So when I say that, I feel like it makes sense that people would have uncertainty around it.
But you're saying, and we referred to Matt Walsh, and we'll talk about him and his positions in a minute, because I think they're examples of some of the other side position-wise. But you say exploit uncertainty. What do you mean by that?
So where I teach at Kent State, we're part of one of the most rural counties in Ohio, actually, but it bumps up against, more populated cities. And so there's a lot of different kinds of students, and I'm saying that for a reason. The students that are from the more rural areas, nobody's ever asked them what they think about personal pronouns. They literally never heard of it. And they don't talk about it. And so when you're being exposed to these ideas for the first time, it can, if you've grown up maybe as part of a community where there's only men and women, and it's all this sort of traditional narrative of how the world works, when all of a sudden there's this cultural shift happening, that can threaten the way that you have grown up, and it can create anxiety. And so my approach is to help people to understand that and work through that. And it's totally fair to have that anxiety. In my view, people exploit it by rather than trying to educate or try to help that individual understand where their anxiety is coming from and how they can work through it. And it's totally fair to have it. They are like, yeah, we're going to amplify those fears and just really exacerbate this divide and exploit it for our own gain.
Let me say something, though. I kind of made a list of just a few. I wrote them down. Just recently, I've done a lot of shows about social issues. Most of these have aired. I've done shows about violence and the police, about no bail legislation, failed prosecution, shoplifting, failure to prosecute shoplifting, the Great Resignation, 34 million people resigning between the first of the year and October of last year, things like implied bias, white privilege, legalization of marijuana, homelessness, how to deal with that, defunding the police, critical race theory, teaching it or not teaching it in the schools, pronouns, transgender individuals and how they deal with it family-wise, community-wise, otherwise. I get feedback. We have millions of viewers live and then in reruns, and we're on Paramount Plus and Pluto and YouTube and all these different things. We're in multiple foreign countries, 220 markets in America, lots of exposure. And one of the things I hear a lot is, why did you let the other side come on and say the things they said? I'll hear from people that are pro one side. I'll hear from a lot of them, hey, thank you so much for letting us come on the platform and talk about what we want to talk about. And then I'll hear from others that say, why did you let those people come on and talk about the other position? And then the other side will come on and say the same thing. Thanks for letting us come on. Then I'll have others say, why did you let those people come on and say those things? Why did you let them do that? Why did you let them do that? And I'm like, nobody wants to let anybody else speak. And I'm astounded that I hear so many people say, if you don't agree with me, if you don't think like I do, if you say things that don't dovetail with my thinking, I am going to criticize you, hate you, attack you, because you don't think like I do, speak like I do, and tell me what I want to hear. What the hell is going on?
I agree with you in that reaction. And it's really frustrating to me too, especially around, the pronoun episode and that the reaction that people had to that. So you laying out how vast your audience is means you are the perfect platform to present multiple viewpoints, in my view, because you're reaching the most people. And the way we need to hear both many different sides of an issue so that people can make a decision for themselves. And when we shut down people from hearing other kinds of perspectives, it's just not productive to me, and it's really boring. And it's usually motivated by the need for validation from one side that's not genuine, in my view. I mean, I could go on and on about this, especially with regard to our episode, but I don't agree. I mean, I think that providing that platform is a good thing.
40% of transgender people noted they attempted suicide in their lifetime, which is 9 times the attempted suicide rate in the U.S., and that transgender adolescents present 4 to 6 times higher levels of depression and 3 to 4 times higher levels of self-harm. So that is a staggering statistic.
Yeah, no, it's horrible. And it's part of it is because we don't talk about these things as openly, or we have, the issues around the pronouns, or parents not understanding what's going on, and then not having that being part of a school system or structures where you can talk about that disconnect around gender, with professionals. Or maybe these kids aren't even well versed enough in a lot of it to understand what's happening to them. And a lot of these horrible statistics just remind me of the need to emphasize that it's not on the individuals, it's not on the transgender community or the queer community to take on this battle and to have to constantly explain themselves and to justify and do all of the educating. It's on the rest of us.
Should teachers, and if so, what is the age appropriate level at which teachers should be talking about pronouns in school, introducing gender as a concept in the schools? And if so, first, should they be, and at what age? And should there be transparency with the parents about what they're going to do before they do it?
I mean, I have a extreme viewpoint about this. That's not extreme, but you could teach about this stuff from the beginning. You can start it in preschool. My caveat is it's always age appropriate. So I teach a sex class. It's called Let's Talk About Sex. It's sex and communication. And so this example, I think, is easier to get across this age appropriate idea. We teach consent in preschool, and consent in preschool is don't touch, Johnny without asking, or don't just go up and hug, Ava. You need to ask first. It's consent in a totally different way that I would teach it to college students, right? And there's a way to do that with gender, and to break it down. Kids. Well, so, I'm communication, and this is more your area. So I'm going to say something. You tell me if I'm wrong. But my understanding is gender constancy, how we identify as a boy or a girl, is when we're 3 years old. So it's not, this stuff is usually not very surprising to the kids. It's the parents that are wigging out. The kids are usually pretty comfortable with it. But again, when I say that, it's not anything goes, it's age appropriate, it's informed by research. And yes, sharing with the parents, of course. But parents, I don't know, as a parent, I like to know all sorts of things that they're being taught in the classroom. It's not about me spying on them or trying to double check. It's like I genuinely, wow, that's really cool. I'm interested in knowing more about that.
So you do think that it's appropriate for teachers to be introducing the concept of the difference between sex and gender?
And yeah, I do. Yes.
And at what age?
I think there's age appropriate ways to do it, from preschool beyond. That doesn't mean in preschool this is sex and this is gender. You wouldn't present it that way. The sex part is learning about your body in a way that makes sense in a preschool classroom. I'm not like advocating for something crazy. And then gender is like teaching about things that boys can go play with the dollhouses, and it doesn't have to be the girls' corner, and things like that. And not, sometimes it's not explicitly teaching about it in the classroom in that way. It's changing how the classrooms are organized. So rather than saying boys line up over here and girls line up over here, if there's no reason to have them separate, if it's just to like go outside or something, why do it that way? Think of other ways that we can demarcate categories in the classroom and not base those only on sex. So those are some examples. I'm not a preschool teacher, but I am saying that you can start doing that, at that age level, but it has to be age appropriate.